Getting bites during tough conditions and pressured waters is what we want. This simple change to how you retrieve certain lures will get you bites on days when others just aren't. And the key is to trigger that instinctual behavior of bass so they attack when they don't want to or don't intend to. Now, some lures or presentations naturally do this, something like a jerkbait, for example. But we need to make this happen with lures that get stuck in that chunk and wind approach. Things like bladed jigs, buzz baits, crankbaits, swim jigs, spinner baits, and whopper ploppers, just to name a few. Well, we're going to take a look at footage of each and the most effective ways to trigger those bites on those super tough days. Prey species up in the water column are most likely to get attacked when they exhibit erratic change of direction or speed. This fires off the instincts of the bass and they turn from that passive observer to a fish that can't ignore that prey. Well, there are two ways to impart this erratic escaping type of action on these traditional chunk and wind lures. Now, most of us do well with bouncing the rod tip, but with these lures that so often are just brought back at a steady retrieve, a quick burst with the reel handle can make a huge difference. Many of today's reels are picking up 30+ inches of line on a full rotation. Now think about that in terms of a bait fish under the water. If it is swimming through the water column and then suddenly has a 30-inch burst, that is going to mimic a fleeing prey species extremely well. Now let's take a look at a few lures. First, the bladed jig. Now, I prefer to fish my bladed jig on the bottom like a regular jig, but I know that many anglers love to wind this style of lure in up in the water column. Well, when we give this lure a quick burst with the reel handle, it suddenly has an entirely different look to it. And you can almost guarantee that a lot of other anglers are not adding this to their retrieve. This will help you stand out when those pressured bass see everything. Now, this one is a favorite of mine. Giving our buzz baits a little twitch or handle burst is so effective at throwing water in a random pattern at a greater distance. From underneath, when we take a look with the camera, this gives off that appearance of a school of baitfish, a school of minnows, for example, that are being chased by a predator. If you're not getting bit with a regular buzz bait retrieve, try this. Now, the same thing applies for a whopper plopper. When that standard gurgling retrieve isn't working, throw in a few quick bursts of the reel handle and change that speed, water displacement, and ripple on the surface. Now, the next one is another favorite of mine. Crankbaits are amazingly effective when worked like this, especially something like a square bill or a traditional deep diver when you are no longer hitting the bottom of the lake bed. And since these lures are more buoyant, a quick start stop is a powerful way to trigger those bites when other lures are not. Very similar to why a suspending jerkbait is so effective. You can get an entire school of bass fired up quickly with this technique. Now, swim jigs and spinner baits are also key lures for this type of retrieve, and with these two, a combination of bouncing the rod tip and giving a burst with the reel handle gives you lots of options to mix up that presentation and avoid that standard chunk and wind. Now, on days when bass are aggressive, a straight retrieve can work great. On days when they are not hitting, this presentation style is one that will pay huge dividends if you master it and practice it. And hey, if you want to watch a video that talks about the multiple fields of view that bass have and how those different fields of view play together to impact the strike zone, go ahead and check this one out right here. And make sure that you go out and encourage someone today. You never know how you might just change their life. For the Bass Fishing Life, I'm your host, Steve Rogers.